to other people. So I'm going to start recording now. So just, keep that in mind. We have other, other organizations on and potentially people watching in the future. So I don't expect there'll be anything that's, specific to your business, anything confidential, but just to make you aware that it is a training meant to be shared. So I'm going to be sharing my screen here in a minute and go through a few things just to kind of go over generally what we're going to talk about. We're going to do a little bit of an introduction. The session in general is meant as a reintroduction. I know some of you have used OptiMiser for a long time. Some of you are just starting. In either case, I thought we were due for kind of an overview of some of the basic concepts in OptiMiser and some tips and tricks to make sure that to see that you're oriented in the tool, because I know it can be overwhelming at times, and just maybe there are some new things in the tool that even if you've used it for a while you haven't seen. So I'm going to make it a fairly general session, and again try to stop and ask for feedback and questions and things like that. And then at some point, Gamaliel, my colleague from OptiMiser, is going to come on when he's ready, and I'll just pause and turn it over to him. And he's going to go over some of the special, more recent features to OptiMiser that have to do with time of use rates and hourly modeling. So this was, I think we've had one training for the whole Arizona crew previously on this stuff, and it's evolved a little bit, but in any case, I again felt like we were due for another sort of overview. We won't have time to go into great detail about that because it's a complicated area, and we're adding a lot of new features in that regard. But just to kind of give you an idea of why we're pursuing that, and what are the kind of the opportunities to show customers, to help guide customers through those choices about what are going to be the impact on their time of use rates and on their cost, maybe some additional opportunities for savings with factoring in demand savings with some of the packages that you guys are implementing for customers. So right at the outset, are there any things that you want to make sure, besides a general intro, are there any aspects of the tool you want to make sure that we have time to cover? Okay. Well, hearing none, I'm going to dive right in here.
Ryan.
Yes.
I have not stepped into the OptiMiser 2020, I guess it is. I'm still using the OptiMiser that I started out using, and I think I find sufficient detail in what I'm using now. Tell me what I'm missing.
Yeah, so that's the piece that Gamaliel is going to talk about. When you start OptiMiser now, in places where we've enabled the time of use AMI data module, you get that option. So for everyone in Arizona, for example, you get that option at startup. And he'll talk about that a little bit. But I started up in that mode, but I'm not actually going to use any of those features in my demo. So you can run either one. The 2020 version is required to do the heat map type of analysis for to load in AMI data. That's the hourly and sub-hourly interval meter data to show people when, not just what their overall energy use is, but when during the day they're using energy. It actually is a tiny bit slower maybe even though it's a more recent version of the code, it's a tiny bit slower. So if you're not going to be making use of that AMI data for a particular job, you can stick with the basic version on load. But I
Okay,
have
thank
loaded
you.
that, so that's why you see this AMI data tab here. I don't have any AMI data loaded, and I'm not going to, but I think Gamaliel will take you through that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so I'm going to talk about why the basic modeling, some key points that I've seen people, some misunderstandings people have had, and potentially, especially how things flow through to the report. Because I think ultimately, we're trying to get a decent model of someone's energy use so that we can make sure that we have confidence that we're doing a good job of putting together a package and predicting what people may save, and then having a decent report to kind of summarize all the effort that you put into the job and do a good job presenting your proposal to people. So I'm going to try to focus on things from that perspective. I'm going to use this old sample file. Okay. So, when you start OptiMiser, you land on this project screen. A lot of these things are simply for reporting purposes. So all of the auditor information flows through to the reports. Of course, owner information and that kind of thing. The modeling itself, in terms of tying this project to weather data, that's based on the zip code. So that's the first thing, is you want to make sure you have a zip code in there, and you'll notice some things start to happen when you put the zip code in. It will ask you, sometimes if you want to load EIA utility prices for that area. So that's kind of the first decision. And utility prices are important for the SIRs and showing dollar savings, right? So if you have, if you're thinking about using the AMI data, or you want to use a particular APS rate plan, we actually have those built into the tool. So you can just choose the right rate structure there. You can always check when you're in the wizard, and I'll show you that on the utility bills page. You can always see what utility prices OptiMiser is using in there on the utility page. Any control, I'm sure most of you guys know this, any control you set, you can right click on and save the value as default. And those defaults, they get applied. You have to restart OptiMiser for all your defaults to take effect. So if you're new to OptiMiser and you've gone through and you'll say, I'm going to save this value as default. I'm going to save this zip code as my default zip code. And then you start a new project using the file new, or clicking the new project icon. You may see that the value doesn't hold, it doesn't stick, your default doesn't in there. You have to restart OptiMiser once, and it'll load that information about the defaults that you saved. And from then on, all the new projects that you do will use those defaults. Backing up a little bit, I forgot to mention, when you start OptiMiser, it checks to see if there are updates available, both for the program, to see if there are new updates to features or bug fixes, and for weather data. You want to stay up to date on both accounts. The program, obviously, it may be fixing bugs, maybe adding new features for you. Either way, you want to make sure you're staying up to date. The weather data is really important for calibrating bills and using historic bills. I know some of you may not be doing that. It's kind of a pain in the butt sometimes to get bill history for customers, but it is really important. It's a really powerful thing in OptiMiser. It's not required to do modeling, but it's a really powerful piece of information. I'll talk about that a little bit. So you put in customer information, zip code, and then you're ready to start through the wizard. a lot of people ask about,
Question, please.
yeah, go ahead.
Question, please. When I'm filling in that information and I'm putting in the zip code, I click next and it says, do I want to use that? It's the EIA information, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I enter yes, because I want them to use current pricing, and I don't keep track of that current pricing in my program. But when I go on in the program, I don't see any change in values for gas or electric. Now, is that happening, or what I normally do is there is a difference in our area between APS and Salt River Project, but that value for electricity never changes that I see. What's missing there?
So the EIA is very, very rough, and it's old. It lags. You know, we do it every couple years. They have these very rough regional estimated prices. So it's not a database of rates by utility, and it's not up to
Okay.
date. So it's
Yeah.
really only the very first basic rough cut if you really have no idea what's going on. You know, the best thing to do if you got an APS customer is to use the APS rate structure. Um, the second best thing to do would be to put in a blended rate that you can get by, you know, talking to the customer or going on the website of the utility, or you know, looking at their historical bills. And the EIA would really be the last resort if you really don't
Okay.
have any
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. I'm using general numbers for each, but I wondered if there was something happening in the background that I didn't know about.
No, that's it. All right. So the first wizard screen, you know, you have a welcome screen, but then you have a building screen here. This is the first one where you have a switch to detailed button. So that's often a question people ask is like, when do you use the detailed screens? I would recommend you stay away from the detailed screens in every building until you get to a point where you need to add more detail. Oftentimes needing to add more detail is because of you have a measure that you're trying to describe, something you want to do, a change you want to make to the building. It's typically not needed for the base information unless you have, there are some cases that come up more often, like you have a third heating or cooling system or multiple hot water systems. Sometimes you have to slide into the detailed screen. But I would, when I start a new job, I start with the simple screens. The other thing I'll mention is some people like to, instead of going through and right clicking and saving defaults, taking the time to set up some defaults, often people will save project files as a sort of takeoff for, maybe because they have different building types that they say, well, this is my save for, you know, your typical one-story single family in Phoenix or something. And here's my one when I'm working, you know, outside, or maybe a bigger house or whatever. It's really not a good idea to save project files and use those, you know, to open old project files as a takeoff, because every time you hit a control, you'll notice these controls are green, the labels. When I touch a control, it turns black. That's because it's now a user entry. So OptiMiser keeps track of what you've entered and what you haven't. And anything that you haven't actually touched is potentially subject to some changes as you're going through. Now, basic stuff about the building, like the year it was built and the condition area, that's not going to change. But as you get down through, you know, OptiMiser might start to push information to try to make the model make the most sense possible. And if you've gone through and you've changed a lot of values kind of deep in the program, then you've locked them and prevented OptiMiser from doing that. So it can, especially over time as the program changes and you're still using these old project files as a starting point, it can really cause problems and end up with some weird results. We see that sometimes when people say, now I tried to submit my job and it gave me this error, and we find that they started with a project file from 3 years ago and have been just sort of opening it and modifying it. And it's not really the way to go. If you want to save, multiple values, you can create a new default values file. So you can actually load, you can have multiple default values files. You can clone the one that you're working on, or you can start a new one from scratch. And then it'll ask you when you load up which defaults file you want to use. And that's really the best way to do it. So that was in the tools menu, new default values file. Okay, so I am going to, and I know that distinction between like when to go to detail and when not is a little fuzzy, but in general, if you can do it on the wizard screen, I would stick to that. And then hop in if you're missing something, or there's a control you want to change in the detailed view, you can certainly do that.
Okay, another question that brings up for me.
Sure.
In Arizona, obviously, we're dealing with heat that they're not dealing with in New York or Minnesota or wherever else. But one of the things that I do switch to detail for, and I guess that's limited to the one change I make, is for ceiling height. Because typically your older homes are 8 foot, but many now are 9, some customs are 10 or 12 or so, and that makes a significant difference in the volume. So that would be one that you would, I would think, want to put in the detail.
So that is actually available in the layout section. So you can put in a ceiling height for each floor and the total above grade height too, which includes that whatever is above grade from the foundation.
Yeah,
and that's one that you can set a default there as well.
Well, okay, my practice was I had put it in on the page we're looking at, but you're saying I can change it later without switching to detail.
For that one, yeah. And I'm not saying that that's going to be true for everything. You can certainly do that. I just think, and maybe it doesn't apply to you as much, but for new people, generally speaking, if you, instead of as opposed to diving into the detail on every screen because you feel like you might be missing something, I would avoid doing that. And in the other case, it's especially true if you have some historic bills. And again, the bills are really, really powerful. If you have some utility bills, then OptiMiser is going to be able to pull out a lot of information from that and automatically calibrate a lot of those detailed values. So it makes it a lot easier for people. So I'm looking, this sheet I keep going back to is some data sheet. So this is some data collected on an actual building. And I'm doing this because I have some actual bills and I want it to calibrate. So I'm going to use some actual values here. So this is a three bedroom home, north length. So when I was going back and forth, I don't know if you noticed, but when you land here first, it hasn't loaded the weather data yet, but as soon as you hit next or you go to another screen that's beyond this, it asks you if you want to load the weather data. Let me just change this and see if no, didn't give me the question again. But at any rate, it gives you a couple of questions. One of them says, can we load the weather data? And you always want to load the weather data for the, that matches that zip code. Yeah, I don't know the range you guys are doing work in, but in most parts of Arizona, the match that we have is probably going to be pretty good. if you're doing work like in some higher elevations, in places, territory where the elevation changes a lot, it may be the case that the weather station we find is not the best one. If you happen to see, on the list, if you look here at the station that we picked and you think to yourself, wait a minute, that's a mile down the mountain. Well, that doesn't make as much sense. You can certainly change that. It gives you a rank ordered list of from the station we think is the best, and a bunch of others that are nearby. So sometimes it's the case where people just know intuitively, oh yeah, I know that the Las Vegas airport is better than the North Las Vegas station, and they'll pick that. But typically it does a pretty good job of finding the right weather station. The other thing it asks right away is that if you want to load region and age specific defaults, and those are just a set of 30 to 40 very basic things about a building that come from a database, that's by vintage and by region, like, what type of foundation does it have? What type of windows does it have? And if you're just starting a project, it's fine to apply those. So I usually say yes if I'm just starting out. Those are all things that are in the wizard, though, that you're gonna see as you go through. The reason you wouldn't say yes would be if you've already been working on a job and that pops up and you don't want to overwrite anything, you can just say no, and it won't change anything. Okay, so the next thing that comes up is bills. So why are bills important? So if you get bill, now this is, I'm not talking about the interval metadata. I'm just talking about monthly bills for electric and whatever kind of fuel bills you can get. If it's if they're a natural gas customer and they've metered bills, you may be able to get monthly bills. If it's a delivered fuel, you may be able to get like top offs for their propane tank, or maybe you could just get an annual usage. And those are all great and important to put in if you have them. The reason being that OptiMiser will look at the weather from the same time period as the bills that you put in, and it will match them and determine how good the information is. And if it lines up well, then it can pull out a cooling load, a heating load if there is any, and a base load and a balance temperature for the building. And it uses those things to actually automatically calibrate the model within and around the parameters that you've set. So, if you have bills in there and you go through and you set an estimated efficiency of the systems, and you might, maybe you have a tested efficiency, in which case you can put that in there, but maybe you don't, you just have a boilerplate efficiency, and you can have a range in there, plus or minus 2 AFUE or something, or an attic insulation. Maybe you've probably observed the attic, but it might vary over the attic space, and you don't know whether you should put in it was nominally 7 inches, but I saw a lot of places where it was piled up and some places where it was pulled back. So you can actually give it a range, from 3.5 to 10 or something. And OptiMiser will, if you've got bills in there though, because otherwise it doesn't have anything to calibrate to. But if you have bills, we actually know how that building is performed. And so then we can calibrate the model to the bills. So it's very, very powerful. And it's pretty easy to do if you can get the bills from people. So we have this scrape tool that makes it pretty easy. So you load up this scrape tool, and I was on the detailed utility page. That's one area where I find it easier to use the detailed screen. It just puts both the fuel and the electric on the same page. I open this scrape tool, and it allows me to paste in any fuel bills I have and electric bills. So I happen to have some in a text file. So you could have them in a text file, you could have them in a spreadsheet. Either way works. And you just copy the data. So I'm going to grab these gas bills. I'm going to hit Control C. I'm going to put my cursor in the top left box there and hit Control V, and it pastes it in. And then I just tell it which columns are which. So if my data had, if it was the other way around, if I had the usage and then the date, I just change the column, right? And I'd be fine. So, and then if it's a spreadsheet that you're going to use a lot, you can set up your column headers, and you can hit save default titles. And then every time you come in here, it will have those columns in that order. I'm just going to get rid of these additional columns here. Okay, so there's my fuel bills, and I'm going to go back to my table here. Here's my electric bills. Again, I've just got the date and the usage. You can have a build cost too. That's another way to get a utility price. If you have a cost in your bill data and you put it in here, OptiMiser will calculate a blended rate from the bills from that period. Again, that's probably not as good as actually picking the APS rate, but if it's an APS customer, but it's something. Okay, so all I've got in these is the date and the usage, and that's the minimum amount I need is date and usage. Again, you may not have a metered fuel. It may be delivered, and so you could ignore it, or you could put in whatever information you have. So I'm going to say load utility bills. And it just takes me back in here, and all it did was it popped these bills in. So the way this works is both the fuel and electric are set up with these sort of monthly time steps, but it doesn't have to be a month. And you see these bills, sometimes my read date changes. It's important to put in, if you're going to take the time to put in bills, it's important to put in the actual read date, because if a billing period varies by even a couple days, then that's going to make a difference in OptiMiser's analysis of the bills. So putting in an actual read date is important. And basically what you're seeing here is just this is the date the electric meter was read, and that's how much consumption there was. And that's all you need. If this was and it's the same for fuels. They read the meter on the gas meter on that date, and that's how much consumption there was. If it was read not 1 month later, but 3 months later, then I would change this date to whatever that was, 3 months out, and put the total usage for that period. So you should never find yourself dividing or adding, to try to put your data into a monthly bucket. OptiMiser will do that. It just wants to know when did the meter read, or when did this period end, and how much did they use? And OptiMiser will do the rest. When it does its analysis, it will try to pull out those loads. Typically, it will warn you if it says, you said it was fuel heat, and I picked up an electric heat source by looking at the electric bills. Do you want to change that? It'll give you a lot of feedback on how that goes. Let's see how this does. So I hit analyze. I could just hit next, and if it detects that there are some new bills, it will do that. I'm going to hit next. So I get this utility analysis summary. This is basically what you want to see. This is the best you can do. It says the gas bill is qualified for advanced calibration and the electric bill is qualified for advanced calibration. That means that I had enough information in there. I had 12 months of bills for each, and they lined up perfectly with weather in that period. So as it got cooler, my electric bills ramped up, and there was this nice regression. And now OptiMiser, we use a national standard, to look at a bunch of different variables about about that analysis. and we say, okay, we can calibrate the model to those things. And you may get some other messages in here. It may say, well, you didn't put in any fuel bills, which is okay. If you don't have any information about what they did, that's fine. Or it may say, your propane bills qualified for basic calibration because you only had like 2 values in there. And that's okay too. You just want to put in as much, accurate information as you have, and it really pays off. It really helps to speed the rest of the audit and to ensure that quality and consistency. These things are really advanced if you want to look at how it's doing the analysis and things like that. The diagnostics is you certainly don't have to look at this as you're doing data entry, but it is just a preliminary cut. It's looking at like the default model in there, comparing it to what the bills are suggesting, and giving you some ideas of some potential issues that it's sort of popping out right away. There's overall low efficiency, both in heating and cooling. It seems like there's pretty low efficiency in there, there's something going on with the hot water. Probably we got to go make sure we've got the right fuel source selected. But again, we haven't touched anything in the model, so that's just a preliminary. And then you can check the prices to make sure those are accurate. If I hit the more button on the prices, you see the EIA prices for this region. You can use those. You can leave what's in there. They also have, over on the right, you'll see fixed and escalation. The fixed cost is you can use a setup where you have $1 per kilowatt hour cost and a per bill or per period charge in there as well. And then the escalation is used for whenever you see an optimizer, it's predicting out energy prices and savings going out into the future. It's using an escalation rate on the cost of energy, which is always defaulted at 5%, but you can change that. All right. So that's utility stuff. I know some of you won't have them in there, but as I'm going through, you'll see, I'll point out some points that, things that it allows you to do when you have bills in there. So dimensions are really simple in OptiMiser. You may have other needs, when you're doing your audit process, your auditors may be doing full, layout sketches so that they can indicate where things are happening in the building. Or if you find that you need to do a more advanced delivery system design, like you have either whether you're doing it yourself or you have a contractor that's doing like a duct design, you may want to do a more advanced sketch. But for our modeling purposes, in order to predict savings, we don't need that. We really just need a conditioned area. And then if the house happens to have a basement, I know is more rare in your neck of the woods, what this means is if it has a basement, does this conditioned area number you put in there, does that include the basement? In other words, is the basement conditioned? If the building doesn't have a basement, it doesn't matter, but that's what that means. And then the length and the width, which it estimates, and as you change one, you'll notice the other one changes because it's basically just defining a box. And then what direction does the front of the building face, and is it the length of the width? And how many floors are there? And that's it. If it's back on the building type, you notice the multifamily is grayed out. It skips that because I said it was a single family detached structure. If I said it was like an apartment with 2 units, then the multifamily gets enabled. And then I can tell it, I can describe those shared surfaces, right? So how much of the of the length is shared. So I can basically set that up. Or if it's an above and below type of situation where there's a unit in the first floor, there's a second floor, I can describe how many the percent of the ceiling that's shared if it's a first floor unit. So if it's a first floor unit and the whole ceiling is shared with another unit, I could say 100% shared. But I'm going to go back and change this to single family detached. These are important for other reasons as well. If it's a mobile home, make sure you select that because you get some different options for mobile and manufactured homes as you move through the audit. But let's stick with a detached house. So foundations, you have to have some type of foundation for the entire footprint of the house. So what did we say? This is 1169. And I didn't apply the area defaults, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do all of that in there. Things are running a little slow on my computer because GoToMeeting's running here at the same time. I'm going to put 0 basement. Okay, and then it says, okay, you've put the whole footprint in the slab, so there's 0 crawl, 0 frame floor. Pretty self-explanatory. You have the area, it automatically calculates the perimeter, and you have the exposed perimeter. The frame floor is the only one that people get hung up on. You just have to remember that it's not asking for the area of all the floors in the house. It's just asking for the area of frame floor that is a foundation area that forms a thermal boundary. So that's typically used for houses where there's a conditioned room over a garage. That would be probably the #1 case. So that whole floor, that room is a frame floor foundation because it separates the conditioned room from that ambient space in the garage. Or for if you have a cantilevered, overhang, that area would be frame floor. In this case, our little building just has a slab, so all the area is over a slab. And then this is more, it's not very useful if you just have a simple scenario like we're doing, but if you had a multi-story house, this helps to set up your attic and ceilings areas later on. So you can describe if it's a cape and so the second story has less area because there are some knee walls, you can describe that here. And describe what type of attic space or thermal boundary is there above that space. So for our little single family house, it's very simple. There's just one floor, it's an 8-foot ceiling, and there's unconditioned attic up top. Super simple. Windows, this is a great area to highlight both the calibration and how these screens work. So the amount of information you put in is really going to depend on A, whether you have bills or not, and B, what kind of improvement you're going to do, or if you're going to do improvement at all. If you're going to try to spec or test, an improvement to the window like a solar film or some other type of covering, or you're actually going to propose changing the windows, then you'll notice when you hit this specify improvement button, it changes the controls to ask for more detail. It asks for area by face of the building because it needs that information to be able to give you a good prediction of the savings. If you're not going to propose any kind of change to the windows, then what it does is it just uses a percent area control. You can put in the areas if you want still. You can hit this button and put in put in the areas. But if you're not going to do anything to the windows, you can just put in a percent of the floor area, which I know to me is a little awkward, or as a percent of the wall area. And then you notice this calibrate button, this row of controls down here. That won't exist if you haven't put in any bills. Because again, if you don't have bills, you don't have anything to calibrate to. We don't have any idea what the building uses for energy, except for what the model says. But if you have bills, then you can give it a range, and it suggests a default range here that's appropriate for this building type. And what that means is it will test all the values in that range along with anything else that it can adjust and try to find the model that best fits the weather normalized bills. So it's a really powerful thing. It means you don't have to true up the window area, go back and forth and look at the bills and say, well, that doesn't make much sense. I'm going to go back and change the window area and see what that does and stuff. So it's pretty powerful. And then there's, of course, the window type. So this is the primary window type of the house. If you've got a second window type, you can say, yep, I want to add a different one. And you can put in the area for that type. And you can keep going and add more types if you want. So let me just do a quick exterior treatment. So the default here is this super solar screen I've got set up in here. And I've got it on all the faces of the house. So let's say you didn't, you wanted to skip it on the north side, then you could, just do that. I'm going to not improve my windows. So if I'm gonna do that, if I'm gonna add a treatment but not do anything to the window itself, I'm gonna make sure to say no improvement. Otherwise that'll go in there along with your exterior treatment. So I said the window I'm not going to improve, but I am going to apply that treatment to it. So again, if you're not going to do anything to the window, you don't have to come in here and specify no improvement. You just don't include it. So even if the default is a certain window type, triple pane, argon fill, low E or something, you don't have to go in there and specify you're not going to improve it. You only have to do that if you've included an improvement to an area like the window area, and I want to include my treatment, but I don't want to change the type. Another way to look at that is if I go to my improvements tab, I can go to details and I can kind of see what I've included and what I haven't. So in this case, the only thing I've included so far is a window improvement. I'm changing I'm adding solar screens. I'm not changing the window at all. I haven't touched any of these other things. So even though there are default improvements set up, I haven't included them in my package. So they don't make a difference. So I don't have to go in and change anything if I'm not going to touch those. Okay, I'm going to skip down to walls. Wall insulation, if you don't know exactly what's in the wall, then you can pick one of these categorical responses, like it's either completely unknown, or maybe you or your auditor knows based on the vintage of the house, or if you've actually poked a hole in the wall and then you can certainly specify it. But you don't need to and probably should not make guesses if you don't have that kind of precision. And again, this is an area that OptiMiser can calibrate through if you have bills. I'm not going to put an improvement on there. So in attics, in this case, I said that the whole attic space was this open cavity attic. If you have a white roof color, that can make a difference. Otherwise, just put all others. And then you specify your cavity insulation. Again, if it's uneven, if you don't know exactly what value to put in there, you can click calibrate and tell it sort of what the range of values is in that attic space. And if I hit improvement, then again, you get what your improved type is. You can add insulation on top if you want to blow in. Let's say I want to put in, R38 cellulose on top of what else is in there. That will add it. If I'm pulling out insulation and replacing it, then I use replace. At this point, I'm going to dive into the detail for a second just to show you these improvement controls. So in the detailed screen, one of the things that you might want to do is at some point to change those improvement menus. So any of these, insulation, air sealing, HVAC, any of these screens, they have these improvement controls. And you have to come to the detailed screen to change your improvement library. You'll see to the right of these controls, there's a little caret button. And this is how you access the item library. So I'll come in here on my cavity insulation control and access my item library, and it lands me in the item library in the attic area on this list, this attic cav insulation list. And it shows me all these items in the database. If I scroll over here, you'll see that some of them aren't actually included on my list when I go back in OptiMiser. When I'm in the wizard and I'm picking a attic cavity insulation option, that they're not on the list. That's because in my library, I told it not to. So I'm not going to include any of these really low R value items on my improvement list because I'm not going to ever do them. And you might want to, narrow this down even further. Right? You might want to just include like a couple of them because that's the only thing you're proposing. It makes the list a lot shorter and a lot easier. You also might want to make a new item. So to do that, you're basically copying an item. So if it's a cellulose item, let's say I want to put in a new cellulose item. I'll just click on my R60 cellulose and say create new from selection. Now I can edit any of these things that show up in green. It's probably hard to see on my screen, but I can edit any of these things. And the name doesn't matter at all. So some people like to put in brand names, especially on HVAC stuff, which is totally fine. You can put in a specific equipment name or a name of a particular product in there. The energy properties in these columns are what OptiMiser is going to be using for the actual energy modeling. So that's important. And it'll tell you what the unit it is. So in this case, it wants a nominal R value for this cellulose and an R per inch. And then there's pricing. So this is where you would also put in your pricing if you want to use the pricing in OptiMiser. You can put it right in here in the item improvement library. And our pricing we have for most products that are in here, most improvements, there's a number of different units that are being used. So in this case, you could put in a price by square foot of attic floor area, by board feet, by square feet of roof area, and then you would put in your unit pricing in here. And we break it down by labor and material. Some lists you will see also have per each pricing, like for HVAC stuff or for DHW stuff, you can put in a per each pricing, just put in total prices. So it's pretty flexible, but it is it's a complex system when you first start. So please do get in touch. We could have another whole training just on putting in costing and getting your improvement items set up. And a lot of people don't. A lot of people are using other types of costing, which is fine. So if you're doing costing outside of OptiMiser, like you've got, whether it's an online tool or you've got some sort of field service system, or you've got a spreadsheet you're using, you can just take your total cost for these basic areas of improvement. Like, okay, my attic insulation cost, I added up all of my little bits and pieces that I'm doing, and it turns out it was $1,350, and you can put in the total cost in there, and that's fine as well. Just note that when you change the item here, like if I go back and say, oh, I want to put in R44, that cost does get overwritten because I changed the improvement that I was doing. So it went back to the database and it pulled the cost that was saved in the database, the unit cost. So that's how you can do that same thing for cooling, for ACs, for heat pumps. You go to the detail page, click on that little caret button, and you can edit the items that are in there, create new ones, change your costs. While I'm here, I'll also show you a couple other things. All of the, it's a little difficult to tell from the screen when you're entering data what flows through to the reports, but all the highest level basic information about the existing conditions and the improvements will flow through to the reports. And on each of these improvement area pages, attics, walls, ceilings, heating and cooling, there are notes controls and photo controls, and those things flow through to the reports. If I click on any of these notes controls, they're specific to that area. So this is a notes control for the attic area. And I'll show you later on, there are actually a number of different pieces of content that you can put in the report, but this is like the primary attic note. These controls are called memo controls, and they let you build up a library of content. So I don't have much in my library right now. I just have this stupid demo sentence that says report content. But you can imagine you can have a whole bunch of long notes that you are used to reporting about the attic. So if you're, if you're going through houses and you're always saying, there's the insulation is misaligned and there's lots of that, you have disconnected ducts. This is the highest priority. You can write that out and then save it to the library for this note control. And then when you come in here, and you can also set it as the default. And when you come in here, it will just be there. And if you want to pick another one, you just click it from your library and click I want to use that, and it gets put in there. And then you can, of course, just write anything else you want in there as well. And there's some limited formatting options here as well. So I'll open the report a little later and show you where that comes in, but that's there for you. And the photos, so there's also a lot of photos in the report. Each area has a couple of primary photos, and in the wizard you get this one photo control. So you're probably going to be adding more photos later as well. But the way that it works is you can pick any photo that's on your machine. It's got to be a local drive, so you can you can download them. If you've got something that syncs to like your iCloud or whatever, you have to have it a locally synced folder. So it has to be on your machine somewhere. So you either have to transfer your photos over, plug in your IR camera, download them, or whatever you can do. You have to get them locally, and then you can look at any folder on your computer, and you can see, you can navigate in and see all those photos like that. And then you just hit attach here. If I don't have a camera, I'm on my desktop, but if you're on a tablet or something with a camera, it will load the device camera automatically. So if you're working on a tablet, it will actually load up that camera, and it gives you a little shutter button, and you can snap photos for that photo slot right there. So that is available as well. Ceilings are for closed cavity ceilings. So if you have sloped ceilings that form the thermal boundary that are in a room, you can put in, you can specify improvements there, put in existing conditions for your slope ceilings. You can specify that either as the footprint, right, the top down area, or as the actual surface area, either one. If you put in, let's say there's, 500 square feet of surface area and it's a 5 to 12 pitch, it automatically calculates the actual area. I'm gonna go back to 0. Again, frame floors, I didn't put any in there, and I'm not going to in this house, but if there was a room over a garage, I could put that in here and put my improvements in. So the infiltration section, obviously really important. If most of you guys probably have a blower door, doing audits with a blower door, so that's pretty straightforward. You're putting in a CFM50 number. If for some reason you're not, there's an estimate entry. It's an alternative entry, an ACH, air changes per hour, kind of estimate in there, and you can give it a range as well. This zone is, is something you might want to change. Make sure that it's set up correctly for your region. There's a little map, this old map. Make sure you've got the right region selected, and just right click it and save that as a default. It makes a little difference. So again, you put in your blow dryer number. For the ASHRAE 62.2, you have to fill out the local ventilation information, and that's used to calculate your minimum ventilation requirements, which are expressed all over on the improved side. So to see that number, you have to open that improvement area, and it shows you what the minimum CFM50 is, and it's red here, and it's saying that it's the local ventilation is required. So this isn't going to be accurate until you finish that local ventilation if you're using the updated 62.2. Well, I guess it's out of date at this point, but the 62.2 2013 standard. And then your improvement you can specify as a percent leakage reduction. We also have an option to specify it as a leakage reduction just in the attic, but generally speaking, you apply it as a percent leakage reduction. You can also, create a more specific target for your CFM50 reduction number. And then there's mechanical ventilation as well. So you can do whole house ventilation. You can add ERVs and HRVs. Thermostat set points, we get quite a few questions on this stuff. So if you have, let me do just a one setback programmable thermostat. Because I have bills entered, so it's giving me both ranges and it's giving me that setback. So it's giving me for heating a day and night target, for cooling a home and away set point, and each one of those has a range. Your heating and cooling can't overlap. Okay, so which some people push back on, but that's just the way it is in OptiMiser. So I get people that say, well, they want to heat it to 75 and cool it to 70 or something, but they can't overlap in OptiMiser. So you're going to have to do the best you can. But the ranges here, again, will only show up if you have bills entered, and they're there to do some calibration. If you actually know their setbacks and they're not messing with it, and they don't have a smart thermostat, so it's not doing any kind of funny drifting, then you would just put these to the same value. So instead of giving it a range, you'd say, I know it's 68 during the day, and at night they let it go down to 67, and then they're cooling it. I know they cool it down to 76, but when they're away, they let it go up to 82, let's say. Okay. So I just know that that's what they set it as, and I'm not gonna give it any calibration room. You can have a, scramble with another set of setbacks if you want. And then on the improved side, all I'll say is you can set a smart thermostat if you're putting one in, so you can have a cost item. But the controls, we're not modeling, we're not predicting what your smart thermostat is doing. Like we're not modeling out the Nest algorithm, and it's gonna change things by half a degree over the next month or whatever. You have to set this as your best estimate of what the improved set points would be if indeed you're going to change the set points. So if you're putting it in, you're programming it for them, like that's something you might know. If it's a smart thermostat and it's going to change them itself, then you may not really know that. But either way, we're not trying to anticipate what the smart thermostat is going to do. It's just a way for you to put that in the report, say that you have some cost there. You can put in improved set points, again, if you know what those improved set points are going to be. Okay, heating and cooling. So the way this is set up, like all the other areas, you have the existing conditions on the left and the improved on the right. I'm going to open the improvement side here so we can see these lined up, and I'm also going to add a second system type. So in the top row here, you have the first system on the left, and then what I'm going to do to that system. And then on the second row here, I've got these set up, but right now they're not affecting the model because there's this percent heating control here. And this is asking what percent of the annual heating load is met by this system. So you have to tell it that before it'll actually include that system. So say for example, if I had a second gas system, I would just add some load there. And if they're both the same fuel type, you could do it by area, right? If I know that it serves half the area, I could say, well, that serves 50% of the heating load. If it was a supplemental system, let's say they had an electric, this is operating a little slowly here. Let's say they just had some electric baseboard, and it's, let's say it's 20% of the load. We could put that in like that. And it's as simple as that. And then each one has an improvement type. So maybe you're going to improve the furnace so that they don't use their electric heat anymore. You could say, okay, well, on the improved side, this is going to go away. It's going to be 0. And now 100% of the load is going to be on this new furnace that you're putting in. It's going to be a 96 AFUE super furnace. So that's possible. You can also go the other way. So let's say you have no second system on the existing condition, and I want to add 50% of the load is going to be an electric room heat pump, which is how we describe a mini split. So when I added that, so now I've got one system on the left, because remember, this doesn't count because it's got 0% of the load. And on the right, I've got a new furnace and a mini split. Now, what if I don't want to do the furnace? Well, I'll say no improvement. So now I've got my existing system. That's going to stay. And I've got this new mini split that's going to take 50% of the heating load. That's a tough estimate to make, but we have some help online about doing more sort of advanced estimates of the load splits, and how in some cases the utility bills can help guide that. But again, up top, we've got this existing system. We're not going to improve it. And then we've got a second system that we're adding. So it's 0% of the load on the existing side and 50% of the load on the improved side. And when I said it was a heat pump, it gave me the cooling properties here as well. So I'm on the heating screen, but I can adjust the cooling properties. So if I go to the cooling screen, I didn't know ahead of time what my default was here, but now I see that I had this. This is describing an existing central AC system, and it has an improvement here. So this is saying I'm going to replace the central AC system, and the delivery is shared with that furnace. And then I'm also adding the mini split. So, that that might be the case, or maybe I don't want to change the AC system. So if that's the case, I would say again, no improvement. So I'm not gonna change the central AC system, but I am adding this mini split here. All right. And then when you get to delivery systems, they should be set up in a sensible way. So if you get to the delivery system and you're seeing multiple sets of delivery systems when you only have one in the house and it's serving a furnace and an AC system, then there's a issue, and that's a sign you want to go back. So there's a lot of logic in here that drives this screen, and it should be set up so that it's describing what's going on. So you set up the heating and cooling systems a certain way, and you get to delivery systems, it should reflect the reality. So in this case, I've got one, it's serving a furnace and an AC system, and that's all there is. So the important control here, these are all critical controls, but right away, the location is really important, because if you put the delivery system in conditioned space, then obviously it's not going to, doing a work on it isn't going to have the same savings effect. It might be critical for comfort and the actual operation of where the air is getting in the house, but in terms of overall savings, it's not going to have that big of an impact. So if it is in partially or fully in unconditioned space, then make sure you indicate that. So if it's partially in the attic, you might say, well, it's 50-50 attic conditioned. Or if it's entirely in the attic, you can do that. And there's two ways to do leakiness. You can do a general observed estimated leakiness, or you can put in a CFM25 value. So let's say it goes from 250 to 125. And then of course you can put in insulation as well. We'll put R8 duct insulation in there. Okay, and again, notes and photos, just like everywhere else. All right, a brief note about design loads. OptiMiser has design loads. Not everyone knows about that or uses them, but our design loads are similar to Manual J. We're not an approved ACCA Manual J provider, because that's a branded thing that you have to license. It's a pretty hefty license, so we do our own design load calcs, and they have been compared multiple times to Manual J, and they align very well. So we do have people that use them even for official sizing reports like they have to do for local code documentation. We've been approved in a number of jurisdictions to provide design loads. So for simple whole building design loads, it's a really effective thing, because they're already in there. When you're doing your audit, you don't have to to go anywhere else, and it'll give you your heating and cooling design for both the existing building and under the improved conditions. So it'll give you some sizing guidance if you're going to do a really deep retrofit of weatherization and air sealing. You're going to make it really tight and really well insulated. Your cooling needs might change dramatically, and this is going to tell you and give you some good insight into the overall cooling loads. And that's also available on the report as well. So your base load audit This will again depend kind of on your needs and on the customer, but the Wizard appliance controls are very simple, as you see. You're basically just picking between a few different dishwasher, clothes washer types. You do want to make sure you set the dry and range fuel, because if you leave that as gas and there's no gas service to the home, they'll see that on the report sometimes, and they'll say, wait a minute, this isn't my house. I don't have any gas. So make sure you select the right fuel type. Um, and you can put in an EV if they have a real simple addition of electrical load to charge an EV. A quick hot tub and pool pump controls, and there are more advanced controls as you get into the detail. It's possible, if you go to the detailed screen, to do a really deep electrical audit. So, and that may be, that may be your process if you've got a particularly a large house, a customer with a lot of people, and you really want to dial in that base load side, then you can certainly do that. And come in and do a more complete electrical audit. So we use curves for typical usage based on occupancy. And if you hover over some of these controls, it'll tell you what that is. You can also open up the major auxiliary electrical load table, and you have some bunch of additional information in there, but it gets pretty overwhelming. So if you're not interested in doing that detailed electrical audit, then that is something you don't need to do. Again, it's going to use pretty good estimates, both in terms of the modeling, and also if you have bills in there, it can calibrate that base load. So another good reason to get bills in there. The pool pump control is probably the most critical one, because it's the biggest opportunity for savings if you're going especially from a single speed pump to a variable speed. So that's a simple way to do that measure right there on the simple screen. If you want to get in and set, play around with it, you can go in here to pool pump details, and you can really get into the size of the pool and the types of filters that are being used. This was, we got some help from Pentair to do this calculator. So it gets into some pretty good specifics there if you want to dial in that pool pump improvement. Lighting, you can, again, it ranges from extremely simple to bulb by bulb count. Refrigerators and freezers, I'm going to skip through here. DHW, this is one where we are actually adding another system, I think, to the simple screen. But for right now, you have to go to the detailed screen if there's multiple, water heating situations. With this, we don't get a lot of questions on this. It's typically pretty straightforward. You have a temperature setting up top. It's giving you a range here because, again, this is one of those controls where you may not have checked it, and it's a calibration point. If you have and you know what the setting is, you can certainly set the min and the max to the same thing. If you're in the time of use AMI version, there's a timer control with settings. Make sure you set the location, whether that's in conditioned or unconditioned space. And then it's similar to that HVAC systems where you specify the fuel, and then the options will change from there. We do support, hot water that's driven off of boilers, tankless coils, just about anything you want to do is in there. So you can certainly change system types. You can change it to a heat pump. Very easy to do in there. And then there's some simple tank and pipe wrap controls. Renewables, if you've got an existing PV system, the simplest thing to do is kind of the bare minimum is just to put in the capacity, the array size. They've got a 4.5 kW system in there. Same thing if you want to specify an improvement, you can just put in, I'm going to add 6.5 kW system. But if you are into PV and you want to integrate that with your OptiMiser audit, it's got a fairly full-featured PV tool set in here, including financial analysis and production analysis, monthly production analysis. And you can save a selection of panels in here with all of their characteristics so that you can select those out and easily specify a system for somebody. Model QA, this is a good way to get feedback about how you're doing. So I've worked through all of these sections of the job, putting in the information that I gathered. And if I come here, you might see, I'm surprised I didn't because I went through so quickly, but you may see some issues that are red. They have red stop signs. Those are going to be the most critical. These yellow ones are more lower level warnings. This is just saying that the capacity of the heating systems is a lot higher than the design load, which, it is not surprising to me. But sometimes you'll have things in here where it will catch if you've used the wrong units for something. Like if you're used to specifying cooling in tons and you left the control in, BTUs, and it's saying, okay, it looks like something's really out of whack here. And these are links, so you can click on these and it'll take you right to the right control. Once you've cleared those up to your satisfaction, and again, they don't have to all go away, they're just for your information. So I'm just going to leave that one and I'll go to calibrate. So this is where it's actually doing the calibration to the bills. And again, you won't get this if you don't have bills, but this is where it's saying, I put in a bunch of information. Some of it was specific points, data points. Some of it was ranges. Some of it was categorical information. And it's going to now model, 100, 1,000, whatever it needs to do, models to find the one that best fits the utility model. So that weather normalized utility information. And it gives me a few options here. So if for some reason I don't want to change the standard, hot water and plug load usage, then I would uncheck these. But because I'm just going through here and I just want to get a good baseline, I want to leave those because I know my utility bills are right. So I want it to, to calibrate those. So if this family used 120% of normal hot water, then I want it to change that for me. If there's some reason you don't want it to do that, then you would uncheck those and it will just calibrate the other loads. But I want it to calibrate all of them. So I'm going to hit begin. Usually this takes, a second, 1 to 2 seconds maybe, but with the GoToMeeting running, I'm experiencing some dramatic slowdown here. Yep, and my display got messed up too. So this is saying that I've got some major errors here because I didn't follow my script. So I was actually just putting in random information. I was so excited there. But so if I actually put in the information about this building, it would have snapped in. But because I just was guessing about the systems and the infiltration and everything, it actually is too far out of whack for it to pull the model in line. So it says you're 43% off. My model is saying, well, you're only going to use this much gas and this much electricity, but my utility bill said I'm going to use this much. So I have to, for some reason, I made a more efficient model than I should have. If they're anywhere near close, it will snap right within 5%. And that's the target. You want to be within 5% on for each fuel type. So your total MBTU should be within 5%. So, in this case, I would be closer if I had paid attention, but I didn't. So, maybe the house is, I could look at my blower door number, and maybe my house is leakier um, than I had put in there, and maybe my cooling system is, less efficient than what I had put in there originally. So if I reran that calibration, it might be able to then snap those closer together. Okay, so those are the times if it if you can't bring those together, going through and tweaking all of those things through those ranges, then so there's definitely something wrong. Um, there's probably a data point that was missed, or maybe a unit that was put in incorrectly. And the thermostat settings as well. If you've got some default thermostat settings in there, and you don't know if that's what the customer actually has set, you might want to widen out those ranges, because it it is I've seen it calibrate hundreds of times in a lot of different building scenarios and bill sets, so it is very good at it. So that should snap together pretty close within about 5%. And having that's the existing usage. So you went through all this work just to make a model that says what you already know if you have the build, which is this is like how much energy they use. But it tells you a lot more than that too, because now you have a good base model, and you can be more confident in the savings predictions that it's making, right? You know that the model has a good understanding of the energy use by end use. I'm not going to talk about the rate analysis. Um, Package is a quick way to look at the items that you selected as you went through the audit. You can also see the other measures if you go to all measures. Say, oops, I forgot to recommend more LEDs. I'm going to click the lighting. Oh, and I also wanted to tell them to reduce their hot water temp, so I'll include that one for free. And then if I go to reports and photos, this is a good some good summary information here. Health and safety, you can access the CAS information from the heating and cooling area as well, and from hot water, but you could, if you hadn't done it yet, you can get to it from here. You can also get to it from the safety tab. So the stuff on this health and safety screen mirrors this, same controls. You have general health and safety information here, bath fans, sewage sanitation. These don't affect the energy model. Okay, these are just health and safety information, and you may have action items that are cost items, so they're a chance to add to the project scope there. And then you have CAS testing as a separate thing. So if I go to the CAS analysis, this is where you put in your actual combustion testing information, the CO and leak spillage and that kind of thing, which can be summarized on the report as well. So my health and safety, the other thing at the end of the wizard here are the notes and photos. This is a great control set because it tells you all of the, it summarizes all of the areas where there's editable content in the report. There's all these different areas, attic ceiling, photos and notes. If I want to access more of them, I can go into the more content here. And I can see for attics and ceilings, these are all available in the report. I have all of these note sections and all of these photo sections. And I can quickly add and edit them in here in one screen. It also presents the owner concerns control set. There are pages in the report that just focus on this stuff, owner concerns. So again, you could you can save defaults in here. There's a bunch of default content in here. You can pick a default one, and then you can add to this list. And I'll show you when I go into the report how those things show up. So the other thing you would want to do is go to your improvement table. There's this, you've seen these multiple times. I showed you it in the wizard, but there's other ways to look at your improvements, so you can kind of do a quick sanity check to see, is this what you really meant to include? Are the costs what you expected them to be in here? Are the savings reasonable, what you expected? If you're doing fuel switching, and in some other cases, it's nice to see the therms and kWh separately, so you can do that as well. And you see the SIR here, and there's a little bit of color feedback to tell you how the SIRs are shaping up. And again, if you decide you don't want to include anything, you can just uncheck it here, and you don't have to worry about it. It's not in your package. So if I don't want to include the PV system, I'm just going to uncheck it. That's all I have to do. Although I did have a base one, so that's a little bit of an issue. But I'm not going to include the new system in my proposal. Okay, and then custom is another. These are all different ways to look at your improvements. Custom is a way so you can actually change the names. You can change the descriptions of these items, and you can add your own custom items down below. These custom items don't have any energy savings, but it's a quick way to add cost items into your package. So you could add, the kitchen sink and put a cost in there, or I'm going to, repair the porch, or whatever you're going to do. If any of you are qualified DOE home energy assessors, this is the HES screen. It automatically can generate an HES label through the DOE's Home Energy Score API. You do have to be a qualified DOE Home Energy Score assessor. So you have to have an assessor ID and a password from them. But otherwise, it's very simple to use. There is a small fee, an additional fee with each job that you get a home energy score for. But it's very simple, and the label can be integrated into the report. So if you want to provide home energy scores, then this is a great, easy way to do it. All right, I am going to jump into the report and kind of see how this information that we entered flows in here. So in the report generator, so this is generating a homeowner report. You have a few different panes of information here. Over on the bottom left, it shows you a tree view of all the pages that are available in the selected report type. The default is the graphical PDF factory default report. The other option is a narrative report that is directly to a Word doc. So they have different content, and you can explore those and kind of see which one makes the most sense. But I'm going to go through the graphical, the PDF version to begin with. Okay. All right. So you also have, for any of the report types, you have a selections file. Selections are ways to check and uncheck these checkboxes really quickly to include or remove pages from the printed report. So there's a default selection, and then there's a few others. If you want to just do a report that's focused on owner concerns, then there is a selection for that. And that will remove a lot of the other pages and just include owner concerns pages and a few others. You can also make your own selection. So if you go through this and you find a bunch of pages that you like, you can check them off. Like I always want to include the attic page, and I always want to include the CAS page, so I'm going to have that, and I want to give people the glossary. Then you can save this as your own selections file. Whoops, can't use that character. All right, so Ryan's report. And then that'll be in here as your selection when you open it up. So I'm just going to go through here. When you click on a page, you can get a page preview of it. And then also whatever page you've clicked on in the tree here, you see the editable report elements up in the top left pane. So in this case, there's a cover page photo and a cover page logo. So if I wanted to change the cover page, the cover photo, well, I don't have a great photo in here. I should have preloaded that. I can drag the photo not onto the page, but onto the element up here. So this text that says cover page photo. And it will load up in there. I'll go to a more interesting page here. If I go to the owner issues page, you can see now I have a bunch of elements here that are editable. I have the problem. And this is a memo control. This lines up with the control that I showed you back in the wizard on that reports and photo, that notes and photos summary. So it's the same control, but the changes that I make here are reflected in the changes that you see in the wizard. So I can pick one of my other problems, or I can edit one, or I can add one. I can write completely new text, whatever I want to do. There's a problem, there's a cause, there's a solution, and then there's a couple of photo slots. These gray boxes that you see in the preview and that gray text, they won't show up in the printed page, but they're there to show you that there's an opportunity to add a photo if you want to. So you see there's a couple red photo slots there. If I click on those, I get my photo picker and I will add one of my photos in there and it shows up in here. And then this one happens to have a default caption. The captions are down here. I can change that, and then I hit refresh to see my updated caption. All right. So that's an owner issues page. There's a bunch of different types of pages in here. Again, you'd want to go through, check them out, see what you like, and maybe put together a couple selections for a few different types of reports that align with your process. There's general home performance info. You've seen this before, this EPA Energy Star image. There's a summary of existing characteristics where it sort of dumps out all that information you collected about the existing building. There's breakdowns of current energy use and then the heating and cooling loads, and specifically this will list all the fuel types. So if you've got a third fuel, like you've got a propane or something, that'll be listed in there too. And then there's different ways to show the improvements. So these are, you probably just want to show one of these. We do have the opportunity in OptiMiser to do multiple packages, so you can show multiple improvement options if you want. But here's one instance of that. You can show how. Oh, this is rates. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to show that. I didn't put any rate information in, so I wanted to show the energy cost going out into the future. So this is where that fuel escalation and inflation comes into play. So you can change the inflation rate that's in there as well. So that shows that. information about financing and payback. And then each area of the house has a page that looks like this that presents details about the existing condition and the improved condition and gives you the opportunity to again add more text, edit the text that's there, change some photos. And you'll see that there are multiple photo pages for each improvement area. So if I had additional attic photos, I can go to my second photo note page. I can add 4 photos, multiple notes. Again, I have another page. So you can really add a ton of photos in each one of these areas. And if you go to the end of the report, there's a bunch of extra photos pages as well. So there's lots of photo slots. Your design
With those
loads.
photos,
Yeah.
Ryan, do those with those photos, if you're adding the additional photos, do those additional photos show up on that report? Because do you see
Yes.
how they're not okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so they
Sure that
will once
boxes
once
check.
we print that report, all those additional photos, even though they're on a different page, will come out with that report.
Yes. Yep. It's a different
Okay.
page. And this, unfortunately, you can't change the page order. So if you had, let's say, 20 attic photos that you wanted to be all together, it's not going to be all together because you have you have 10, you probably have like something like 12 or 16 photos in the attic section. And then you go into the extra photos and they show up at the end of the report.
Got it. Okay.
They do have captions though, so you can caption them.
Awesome.
Yep. Right. So do you have your design loads in here if you want to show people and talk to them about undersizing, oversizing, thermostats and scheduling? We're doing a lot of work on the on the time of use type of information. So that's an active area development. Would love to get feedback on the reports as well. If you have a better way of presenting to customers or changes you'd like to see, love to get feedback on that. And as well as anything else that you're seeing in OptiMiser that would make things more usable for you. But that's a particular area of focus right now. PV, the HW controllers specifically, all your base load. And then roadmap is a chart that shows you anything that you actually haven't selected. So it shows your existing home, your energy costs as it stands, your energy costs after your proposed improvements, and then anything that has that SIR greater than 1 that you haven't included that you could show them as a future potential upgrade. So maybe you've gotten the idea from them that even though doing the that little bit of wall touch up that you did a thermal imaging and you said, well, you should really re-insulate in this area. They're not convinced. They really don't want to do it. You can include it, as sort of a roadmap future thing they can come back to. And then the energy estimates page is just basically a description of what OptiMiser is doing. So if they're wondering, why, how did you come up with these estimates, then this will describe sort of why you went to the trouble to collect their bills and what kind of work you're doing. And then of course it goes through CAS and health and safety. It has a glossary and then the extra photo pages. You also have the ability to attach PDFs. So if you have some manufacturers sell sheets on, Mitsubishi heat pumps or whatever, you can attach those. The way you do it, if you look at the preview, it gives you a little instruction. Well, it just gives you an error, but basically you need to put in an absolute reference to a location on your computer. So if you had a PDF and it was in your downloads folder, you could go there and copy the address on your computer, and then you would put it in here. That didn't work very well, but you would put the absolute address in there. So it's not a perfect solution. If it works the best if you have some stock pages that are stored somewhere and they're not going to change. So if you keep a Mitsubishi cell sheet in a specific folder on your computer, you find the address to that folder, put it in here, and then you can include that at the end of the report. And you can do that for up to 5 different PDFs, but of course the PDFs can be multi-page. So if you combine them, you can put in any number of PDF pages in there at the end. A quick note. I guess I haven't seen Gamaliel on getting support. The best thing to do if you run into any issues inside OptiMiser on a specific job, if you're looking at the improvements and saying, this savings just doesn't make any sense, or I was trying to replace this air conditioning system, but it ended up adding another air conditioning system. Then what you want to do is hit the send error report button. And those are just examples. It could be anything that's going on in a specific job, and it will pull in the name and the email if you've got that in your registration file locally. If not, make sure you put in your name and your email if that's not there. You don't have to worry about the assign to. And then you put in a little description of what's going on. AC improvement savings looks weird. And this is kind of important. If the issue involves the report or photos, like, I put this photo on the cover page, but it refuses to show up. It always brings in some other photo for some reason. Make sure you check that box, because otherwise it won't. If you check it, it scoops up all of the information about the photos you're trying to attach and the reports that you ran. If not, then it won't, because it's a lot of data, so it doesn't do that. So make sure you check that. It will try to capture a screenshot. I'm not sure why my computer has been having trouble for some reason. I had a Windows update. Clicking the screen. And so, yeah, I'd be interested to see if other people are having problems with this, because mine just started doing this. It will try to take a screen capture, but for some reason my computer hasn't been allowing it, and it will put it in there automatically from wherever you were when you hit the send error report button. If you want to attach another one, just take a screenshot anywhere and then attach it as a file. Right, so you can attach anything. You can put a bunch of photos in a Word doc and attach that if you want, and then hit send. And that'll get queued in our issue report system, so no one loses track of it. Someone's always monitoring that, and they will get back to you and say, okay, this is what you do to fix it, or we need to look into it, or something, so you know that that's being resolved. Other options for more sort of training, support type questions. Let's see here. If you go to optimizerenergy.com, there is a whole support area. There's a forum. We monitor and respond to issues that you post on the forum, so you can search that for issues that maybe other people have run into. There are pre-recorded videos there. And then there's also a chat feature. This is only monitored for like 6 hours a day. So, you know, you can leave a message here if it's not monitored, but it's not going to be you know, 100% all the time. It's a live, you know, live chat. You can leave a message there. And then of course there's our email address and our phone number. But I will stress that if it's a problem that's going on in OptiMiser in a particular project, you need to hit this error report button from inside OptiMiser, because otherwise we don't have access to what's going on your machine. So we don't know, you know, what's happening. That will be the first thing that anybody from OptiMiser asks you. If you say, oh my God, this doesn't make any sense, the savings don't line up, you have to hit that button, so we can get the information that we need. And once we have it, we're usually pretty speedy about diving in and figuring out what's going on. So I think I saw Gamaliel get on. Does that mean you're ready to go, Gamaliel?
As soon as I finish chewing.
Okay. All right. So we've gone through a whole rapid introduction, all my usual stuff, and we've gone through the wizard. We've talked about bills and calibration from a general optimizer standpoint, and we've talked about reporting, and I've shown them the report, but I haven't talked at all about the AMI data module and any of the other features. So I think any refresher information or intro information that you can give would be great. And if you you know, want to gather feedback, they're all controlling their own mics, so they can respond if you have any questions you want to ask.
Okay. Sounds. Trying to resize my application.
There it goes. Looks pretty good. Oh, that's even better.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk about all the special features that we've built specifically for APS users. So that starts here with the APS rate structure control, appears on the project tab. This is where you can select from any of the current rate structures available to AWS customers. This also appears other places, but this is the first place just as part of the basic project setup. So let's see. I don't know if I want to start there. Well, sure, why not? So this analyze rates page of the wizard is kind of the main place where you would review your rate structure, and you can set a separate proposed rate structure from the base rate structure. And there's a selection of charts to help you visualize that. And all of these charts can be included in the report on a couple of pages, specifically for communicating about rate structure. And those pages are pretty bare right now in terms of content. We've been hoping to get feedback from users about what they'd like to see there. So right now, you can select a couple of charts and then you can put in whatever text you want. But we'd love to get feedback, sample text that you like, anything like that on how you like to present this stuff. So as I said, you can pick your two rates here. It shows you the model. This is the proposed building total annual electric costs with the two rates. You can see here I'm comparing Saver Choice to Saver Choice Max. And then the default charts that it shows here, one is illustrating the proposed rate in a 24-hour by 12-month table, and then the demand rates over here on the right. And this just allows you to kind of visualize where things are most expensive. So obviously it's in this case, it's in this block here that represents the peak period during the summer months. And then you juxtapose that with what the model is showing your load profile will be like. So in this case, I've implemented a bunch of measures to reduce that peak load. I'll show you those in a moment. There's a couple other buttons here. So this will pop up one that just compares the two rates. So you can visualize the change in rates. So here I'm going for the saver choice. It's really heavy on the peak period kWh costs, doesn't have any demand charge. And then it's got the super inexpensive, super off peak. But then when you go to the saver choice max, you bring down all of your kWh costs in favor of having a demand charge. This one compares the usage pre and post. This is the base building usage with the improved building usage, or yeah, to let you see how you're moving loads around with your measures. And then this will be the cost. So basically the product of those other two charts, how much you're paying in each hour and how much you're paying for your demand each month. Let's see, there's a couple more individual charts. This is your savings, so that's the difference between the base and proposed. So you can see where you're adding loads. So this negative savings is where you're shifting. So this house has a pre-cooling measure applied, so you're shifting cooling load out of the peak period. And then once you reach the end of your peak period, you kick the cooling back on, so you see a big spike there. Also, you can do that in terms of dollars instead of kilowatt hours. And then this is where you can pick which chart you want. You can show two charts. You can pick your charts, and then you can enter your text in the memo controls. Any questions on that so far?
Nope.
All right. One word of caution on these annual totals is that for demand charges, the model has a pretty smoothed out curves of usage, right? So it doesn't have spiky little bits of someone turning on appliance here and there. So your overall annual demand charges are going to probably be underpredicted for most people, because they'll just by random chance they'll stack usages and end up with a demand charge that's a little higher. Your savings, you know, when you're improving the efficiency of any one of those items, the savings, so the difference between the two, is still going to be good. So our predicted savings for demand ought to be pretty good. We are looking at NREL just released a big end use profiles database, and as part of that, they have kind of stochastic randomly generated usages, which do simulate true usage, and we're hoping to integrate that at some point. But for now, that's just a word of caution when considering demand charges and total costs. So let's go back and look at a couple of the measures then. So one of the load shifting measures is the hot water heater timers. So that'll be, if you want to specify a hot water timer, you'll click the specify temperature timer change and then check the timer checkbox. The settings allows you to set which hours. The default hours are the peak period hours for all APS rates, so you shouldn't have to change that. There's not a default cost, so that's something you have to set yourself. And then the other major feature that we added is the addition of these pre-cooling schedules. So if you click specify improvement, and then switch to pre or maintenance cooling schedule. So this allows you to set what's your comfort temperature, what's your pre-cooling temperature, for how many hours do you pre-cool, and then if you're going to have a maintenance cooling schedule, this is something that I know APS has been piloting with some contractors, where they they set up a schedule that only operates for a certain number of minutes out of each clock hour to limit the potential for a high demand charge. And these are the 4 schedules that they've defined. So you can see here, I've got this schedule operates 20 minutes out of every hour. And in order to run this model, initially this will be blank. So this is a sub-hourly model. We use Energy Plus. So the first time you use this, you'll have to download the whole Energy Plus and OpenStudio HPXML package. Could take about 20 minutes on a standard high-speed connection. It's a pretty big download. But after that, then you're all set. So once you select that, this weather file will be empty. You have to click Browse. It'll automatically take you to the folder with the Arizona weather files. You pick your weather file, and then you click Run Model. That'll take around 20 seconds. And then you'll get this nice chart which shows you the hourly. This is the operative temperature, which is the temperature. So our prediction of the temperature as experienced by the occupants, and that's a blend of the air temperature and the mean radiant temperature, which is the temperature of all the surfaces in the building. Because the air temperature will go up and down more quickly as the system kicks on and off, but what you actually experience has to do with the temperature of all the surfaces, the temperature of the mass of the building, and it gives you a smoother profile and more accurately describes what the user experiences. So this enables you to determine whether or not this schedule is going to maintain a comfortable temperature. So in this building, before I came here and did this, I went and put solar screens on the east, south, and west windows. I insulated the attic, and I did a ventilation or a infiltration improvement. Before I did that, before I did that, this internal temperature was getting up to 80 and above. And so that was not going to work. You wouldn't be maintaining comfort for the occupants. So this allows you to design a package where you can pre-cool, and then with the maintenance schedule, or in some cases, even without a maintenance schedule, depending on the nature of the building, you might just float through that whole peak period without reaching an uncomfortable temperature. Any questions on that? All right. So the last thing I want to cover is the AMI data analysis tool. So you can, with the cooperation of your customers, download hourly interval data from their customer portal with APS, and then those files can get loaded. I have some samples of that data. It'll come in as a CSV file, and you'll just browse to it and load it up. And then you'll get this this heat map chart down here, which shows you hourly usage for the entire year. You can toggle on whether or not you're hiding weekends and holidays. So here you can see the weekends are highlighted. You can see differences between weekend and weekday behavior. Typically you want to hide it because that's, if you're focused on reducing peak charges and demand charges, weekend and holidays don't count, so you keep that hidden. Let's see. This just allows you to look, instead of at the hourly data, at the total kWh, the average kW, the peak, the average kW during the peak period, and the max kW during the peak period. And then there's a whole bunch of analysis that we do on this data. So this is, APS had wanted us to develop some kind of benchmark that you could use to compare homes and get a sense of what kind of pre-cooling measures might be possible based on what's the, so this is the benchmark we developed is a watts per square foot of cooling. And that's at at a 95-degree daily temperature. So it's kind of like middle of summer. What's your watts per square foot of cooling? And then there's a bunch of other things that we pulled out here, just interesting ways to look at the data. And this is a regression line that compares the average kW for the day versus the total degree days for the day. And this regression line is what we use to develop this benchmark number. It's essentially a transformation of the slope of this line. If there is electric heating in the building, so this building doesn't have electric heating, so unchecking this actually gives a slightly better result just in terms of statistical confidence. Didn't make a big difference in the top line result. If you had electric heat in the building, you have to have this checked, because otherwise we can't identify what's the base load and then properly isolate the cooling component. This table is basically where you can get a sense of what your demand charges are. So that's the demand, the kilowatts for the demand charge hour for each month. And then it's got a few other things in here, just to help you understand the monthly differences. And then the final item here is this rate analysis. So this is a different rate. This is like just a way to play around with the rates. And this is a different rate selection from the ones that we showed before. This one's not being applied to the model. It's only for this analysis to let you see different rates. And this then shows you an analysis of this rate applied to this AMI data. So it's not based on the model, it's based on their actual usage. And so you can compare what their cost would be for this actual usage under different rate plans. So this gives you a good gut check on recommending rates when compared to their actual usage patterns. And then it's got a few features here. This is kind of just like a quick and dirty way to estimate how much they could save. So this one, outliers removed. You can see here that this line is attempting to determine like what you could expect as a typical usage, and anything above that line is like they just did something weird. They turned on too many appliances at the same time. This is to give them a sense of how much you can save just by being a little more thoughtful about your usage. No changes in your overall usage, but just trying not to stack up usages or turn on something that's a really high draw during the peak period. And then this one is a real simple estimate of how much you could save just by setting your thermostat up 2 degrees during the peak period. So no pre-cooling or anything, just by taking a small hit to your comfort to save money during the peak period. At this point, none of these things are appearing in the report. Again, we were hoping to get feedback from folks, and then if there's something here that you like, or there's something here that you think if I just could look at it in this way, it would be a perfect way to communicate with my customers, let us know, and then we're happy to, it's easy for us to dump any of these things into the report. So if there's something you want to put in the report, let us know. Any questions about that? All right, I thoroughly confused you all, I assume.
A lot of new information. My clients are trying to keep a little simple for their customers, but I'm fascinated by what's available here. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, and if it's too complicated and there's anything you think we can do to make it easier to digest, we'd love to get feedback.
Yeah.
I think but the most important things are to get the right rate in there and at least check out what some other rates might look like for each home.
Great, thank you so much. So we hit our time limit here. I just wanted to emphasize, first of all, thank you so much for joining and doing this. Please do stay in touch. There were a couple major pieces that we asked specifically for input on. One is the report, and specifically with this new time of use, rate analysis, AMI data, how it's a complicated world. It's complicated for you guys, it's complicated for the customers. So if there's any ways that you've found, and we're doing a lot of research in this area as well, any ways that you've found that make it easier to impart important information about how much savings potential there is, all the good things you're doing for them, the options that you've reviewed, you can, how do you demonstrate all the work that you've put in, those different measures that Gamal highlighted, or ways, maybe just general education information about what time of use mean, what ways that they can make sure that they're getting the most out of their rates, and the improvements that you've put into their house. Those are all things we want to include in the report. So please give us feedback. Also, I went over the error reporting, best way to communicate if there's specific issues inside a project. You can also feel free to email, and I showed you on the website where that general contact information is. One thing I don't think I've mentioned is we're also looking and working on better ways to do data collection in the field with mobile data collection. OptiMiser has some features that make it nice to use on a tablet, but for people who want to use phones, iPhones and Android devices, we're looking at better ways to collect data and not have to retype it. So if that's important to you and you think that might be effective for your audit process, please get in touch. We're just asking for help on sharing with us any data collection forms that you may have, whether they're printed or a digital form or anything like that, so we can see what people's processes are like, the steps they're going through, in what order, and what information is critical to collect, so that we can do that. And the idea there would be to be able to collect a good basic set of information in the field and have it load up in OptiMiser. So that's another exciting area that we're actively working on. But again, thank you so much. I'm going to make this recording available and I will email you all. And please do get back in touch if you think of any other questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you, Rusty. Always appreciated.
All right. Thanks, Jerry. Bye-bye.
Bye.